How's it going, YouTube? This week, I wanted to look at using sequences as oscillators, not in a super in-depth way, but this is like a jumping off point for a patch that I've made, and I just wanted to sort of discuss it. So what I've got here is sequencer 3 from VCV. It's a 3-track sequencer. I don't use it that often, but it's a very cool functional sequencer. So what I've got is I've got a VCO with a square wave output clocking the clock of the sequencer. And then CV1 here is going out into a scope so we can look at what's happening. Currently there is nothing happening. And I've got a VCA just to control the volume. And I'm just going to turn some of these knobs and we'll see on the scope things change. And we'll hear something as well. So right now, what we've pretty much got is a pulse wave. If I hit that, and then if I zoom in a bit, we can see that it's effectively a pulse wave. It'll just get louder the harder we go in each direction. Let's just leave it about there, and let's bring in some other elements. And you can see on the scope what we've got. It's a waveform, effectively. And because we're clocking it with the VCO, we're running it at audio rates. Just going to undo that for a sec. So I looked at this sort of stuff, I don't know, a few weeks ago on one of these videos. And at that time, I was using envelopes as oscillators. At that time, I sort of had forgotten in the video that envelopes are not bipolar, they're unipolar. So that was causing a few weird issues that I had in that video, but it still was very functional. And you can get around that with an envelope by using an offset device to just offset the waveform effectively into a bipolar situation rather than unipolar. But we're not having that issue with this sequencer because the sequencer, each step on it is bipolar. And you can see, like when I move this one, for example, if it's in the middle, it's directly in the middle and it causes no sound. It does nothing. But if I move it, all the way up or all the way down, it's bipolar. And so that helps us get a nice tone. I'm just gonna bring this back in. So we've got this hectic tone going. You may notice as well, if we change the steps, we change the pitch because we're changing the length of the waveform, which in essence changes the rate that it plays at. But we basically get these nice intervals. So this is like an octave down or an octave up. And if we go to nothing, with no steps, we get nothing. One step is basically a square wave because that's the shape of these waveforms. So we get sort of intervals of pitch, which is pretty cool. So that's the basic principle that I wanted to look at today. But if we go down a bit, in this same session, I have a pretty extensive patch here, which uses this as a jumping off point. I've got some other stuff going, which I will definitely talk about in a sec, because there's some other modules in here that are really cool that I haven't really used before. I also kind of wanted to look at frames, or this keyframer. Pretty sure it's called frames. No, it's called keyframer, but the mutable instruments version is called frames, I believe. Frames is a little bit like pulsars from geodesics. It's a much sort of simpler version, I suppose. Well, not simpler, just like less inputs. We'll get to that in a sec, but this is the sequencer here that is our oscillator. I'm using it in a slightly different way to the previous example in that I am sending it into this keyframer, the first 3 channels, and I'm using the frames. I'm modulating the frames with an LFO, and the output you can see on the scope here. This is the waveform that we're getting, and it's changing all the time, but I'm also sending it into a slew, and I'm modulating the slew, which is giving us these different shapes. So let's just listen to what that sounds like. I am sequencing it as well, and I'm doing a very similar thing over here. I'm using this sequencer 3 and I'm sending it in the same way into the frames, and I'm again modulating the keyframes on this knob here with an ADDR sequencer. So with each step we go from one sequence to the next in succession. So we get a kind of evolving sequence. It's evolving because I'm clocking the ADDR at a divide by 8, and that's being clocked. The clock division is coming from where are we? Here. It's coming from this device up here, which we'll get to shortly. That's controlling some drums. But basically, what we've got is an oscillator with the sequencer, and then another sequencer controlling that oscillator, effectively. And we're just modulating between shapes. And the slew is also changing the timbre of the sound. So a good way to demonstrate this would be for me to remove this, so we just get a tone. And then you can hear the modulation really clearly. The slew tends to shift the waveform from like more of a square wave to a saw wave, which makes sense when you actually look at the shape. It sort of shifts the shape across to more of a saw shape. I just find this kind of stuff sort of fascinating because, you know, in modular, you're not, like, that's not what the sequence is supposed to be used for, but you can totally use it that way because it's modular and it's all just CV signals. And CV can be audio and audio can be CV, and it's just cool. So I kind of wanted to look at it. That's pretty much that voice. I've got a bit of chorus happening, and it's going into this stereo strip, which I'm modulating the panning of, so we get like a nice stereo width on it. And then it's going into a compressor. Well, it's not going into the compressor. The compressor is going out into the chorus. You get the idea. So let's bring our this other sequence back in. All right, and let's mute this for a sec. And let's look at this drum beat that we have here. I'll unmute this one as well because this one is part of that. Some delayed parallel processing. So what we've got here is we've got two trummers. One's trummer 2, one's trummer FM. And we are using separate gates on each of them to control the oscillator and the noise. Noise is kind of, you know, like a hi-hat, and then we've got a kick on each of them. And it's very wonky. It sort of sounds like Autica tracks from the album Untilted, if you've heard that one. But a lot of the tracks are a lot like this, really just sort of glitchy, irregular rhythms. But what's causing that? Well, it's this module here from DocB. It's N3. It's a gate sequencer. It's kind of like a Euclidean sequencer, but not really. Basically, with each track, you can decide how many vertices, or steps really, these shapes have. And I've got it clocked at a really high rate because it just sort of needs that. Like, if you send in a clock that's more like this one here, it's just really slow. So I've got it on like a 64th note or something. Let's have a look at our clock. Yeah, times 64 for that one. But I'm modulating with brains here. Brains is being clocked by this kick drum here, this gate, which, as you can see, lots of things are being clocked by it, in fact. And that is only on 3 vertices, so it's basically a triangle in here. So we get like a 12/8 or 4/3 kind of vibe, like a waltz, basically. But it's more wonky than that because the brains is modulating this skew knob here. And as you can see, the skew does some crazy shit to the shapes. If I bring in another one here, you can see how it's that purplish one, which as I move it, you can see it's a little bit difficult to see. Maybe I'll just get another one. And show you what I mean. Let's just clock it from here. And the more beats you add, the more sides of the shape there are. And when you do the skew, it just messes with it. So it adds more beats to it. And I don't know if it adds more beats, but it changes the location of them. So you get an irregular rhythm. Very cool stuff. You can also rotate it, which I'm not doing in this beat. But it's very cool module. I realize it sounds very wonky. That's kind of the vibe of this patch. It's just how I wanted to make it. I also up the top here have a Vesic voice, which is a complex analog oscillator from Volt. Let's just bring it in. So I've got a trig sequencer from Sikazel, clocking a step sequencer, which has been quantized here, and that's going into Vesic. I'm also using this other step sequencer to control one function on Vesic, which is the FM function over here, which is also going into this slew. And I'm using Languor here from Wicked, which is a random module, effectively, to modulate various elements. I'm modulating the fold, the shaper, the offset, amplitude modulation, and this one is actually not doing anything, so I can just get rid of that. Vesic's a very cool module. Very cool oscillator. As you can hear, very interesting sounds. Got that going into a slap. Really love slap. It's a really great envelope module. Packages in VCA as well, which is just handy. It's just handy. And you've got these 3 different settings: soft, hard, and gentle. Hard is really for drum synthesis, or as a drum envelope, I should say. Really great stuff. I absolutely love slap. And I've got it going into this dual looping delay from 4MS. Very cool delay unit. I forgot to mention as well with the drums, I'm doing a very similar thing as I was down here, in that I'm using frames for each voice, so we are cross-fading between different settings different mixes of these 4 voices, which I just think is cool. It's just a cool way to do things, and I'm doing that with a sample, and I'm modulating the keyframes with a sample and hold, which is being clocked by the kick drum. That's going into debriatus. And then we are parallel processing this signal with a liquid filter on bandpass and going into a chronoblob. So you can hear that in the background, which maybe I'll just solo it here. So that's just our drum beat. And I'm modulating that with Langor, the frequency modulation on the liquid filter. And that's a lot of the patch. Let's just bring in those elements, all of them. Now, some of you may criticize me on this for making a patch that is pretty weird. I've been on a bit of a weird bent recently with modular music, so this is just kind of what came out. But I do think there is kind of like a nice logic to it. But there is one other element. Let's just unmute that. So I'm using this Tezca module here from Ohm or OME. It is a chord sequencer, I guess. It's a creates chords. It's pretty weird, and in the manual, the creator definitely says you're going to get weird results with this. So I think it's quite fitting that I'm using it in this patch, which is already very weird. But because it is limited, I think, to a major scale, I'm basically just sending it into a quantizer. So it's the same scale as the rest of the patch. And we're using Poly 7Cs as our voice. Not heaps of modulation on it, just some light wavetable modulation. Because you can go wild with Poly 7Cs. It's an unbelievable module. Really cool stuff. You can not only modulate the wavetable, which of course you can because it's a wavetables oscillator, but you can crossfade between the banks of wavetables, which is just stunning. Stunning stuff. Absolutely love it. And I'm using this ST VCA from Ouroboros Industries. As it claims itself, it is a what do you want to call it? It's a stereo version of the VCA. You can see it's split into 4 here because it's a 4-voice chord, but they're rising all as one, so you can sort of barely notice it. And yeah, just using an ADSR and a bit of EQ, and I'm using this. I really hate the name of this. Arse spreader. Not good. Not good. Not good, Mokba. But it is a cool module. Spreads the voices out across the stereo field, which I really appreciate. And yeah, I'm just using some LFOs here to subtly modulate the waves and the banks. It's really subtle though, really light modulation. And yeah, that's just giving us some like harmonization of the rest of the patch. So let's listen to everything together. Might be fun to do something with this. Like trigger the envelope with something else, say a burst generator, perhaps. Just use this one because I know it inside and out. Let's just take our gate and go into here for our clock. And let's go pulses and re-trigger on. Is this going to do it for us? Oh, I shouldn't be in the clock, I should be in the trigger. Silly me. There we go. And then we can perhaps, let's bring in something from Wicked. It's this Lorenz module. And let's just modulate our pulses. No, sorry, our rate. And while we're at it, let's also modulate our decay. Let's just go with that. And yeah, it's probably just going to do it for this video. You should definitely check out Frames. Just as a quick primer for it. That's what I wanted to do. So with Frames, you can, let's just initialize it. You've got this knob in the middle, and you can set scenes basically and add them with these input gains. I'm gonna bring it up here, change it like that. Say, add another one, and then maybe over here, let's just add more. And then when I turn this, you can see the lights, they change depending on how I've set them. So that's just a really quick explanation of how that works. Let's bring in a bit of crunch. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. As chaotic as it is. I actually really like this patch. I think it's pretty interesting. Let me know what you think, as always. Yeah. People probably don't use sequences that much for oscillators, but you totally can, and it's very cool. So I hope you enjoyed that. Go check out my other videos. Doing a video series called Making Beats at the moment, where I make beats on the machine drum. I'm up to episode 6, I think. Maybe 5. Can't remember exactly. It's all a blur. I'm also doing some videos about my PhD project, which is AI related. If that interests you at all, go check that out. I'm going to make this patch available on Patch Storage. I'll leave the link in the description so you can play around with it if you wish. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.